My name is Michael Reeves. I'm 37 years old. I live just outside Seattle, Washington, in a quiet suburban home at the edge of a pine grove. Neighbors wave, sprinklers hum. The air smells like damp earth and cedar. To anyone passing by, I'm exactly what I appear to be. A calm, collected man with a successful small business and a pretty girlfriend named Sarah. Normal, predictable, safe. But none of that is the truth. Not really, because people like me aren't supposed to exist. There are no public records from before 2012, no high school yearbooks with my face in them, no birth certificate that anyone could verify. I'm a blank line where someone else should be, and that's exactly how they trained me to live. Invisible, forgettable, and never noticed until it's too late. But let's start from where the world began believing I was someone they could trust. Sarah and I met at a business conference in Chicago. She was charming, with a disarming laugh and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something behind a smile. She said she loved the simplicity of life, hated drama, and just wanted a partner who knew what he wanted. Back then, I thought I did, so I let her in, piece by piece. Carefully. Or so I thought. She moved in after 6 months. We planted lavender in the backyard and adopted a dog we named Cooper. I taught her how to use my espresso machine. She started leaving little notes on the fridge, things like, "Don't forget to eat," or "Let's go to the lake this weekend." It felt good, strange, but good, like wearing someone else's life for a while and finding that it fit better than you expected. But peace has a sound. It hums in the background. Soft, steady, almost hypnotic. And when it changes, even slightly, if you've been trained to listen for silence between the noise, you'll notice. At first, it was small things. Her phone would light up late at night with messages she wouldn't answer around me. She started closing the door during work calls. Not all the time, just enough for it to feel deliberate. She stopped asking me about my day, and one morning, I caught her copying down numbers from a locked drawer in my office. One I never told her how to open. She smiled and said it was for accounting, that she was just trying to help. I kissed her on the forehead and said nothing, because I've learned something far more dangerous than anger: patience. And when the world thinks you've gone soft, when your enemies start to underestimate you, that's when you watch closely. Sarah began spending more time in the city, said she was reconnecting with old friends. She started dressing like she was meeting someone who made her feel excited again. The scent on her coat changed. She moved her passwords from the phone to her wristwatch. Around that same time, a new figure appeared in our lives. Evan Rose. Confident. Loud in the way insecure men often are. He called himself an entrepreneur, though I never once saw a business tied to his name. He always managed to be around when I wasn't home. At first, Sarah insisted it was just business, that Evan had connections, ideas, a potential partnership for growth. But she avoided my eyes when she said it, and I let her. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to see what she'd do next. What they didn't know was that the house had been built with more than comfort in mind. There were mics hidden in fixtures and silent cameras placed where no one ever looked. I didn't watch everything, not at first. I wanted to believe she was still the woman who laughed beside me in the dark when the power went out. But then I saw them, together. And suddenly, everything was clear. They thought I was just a man who'd gotten lucky, that I had no idea what they were planning. They whispered about assets, about leverage, about making sure he's out of the picture completely. They wanted the house, the company, the life I had built. And they thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back, because what they saw was a man who wore sweaters and smiled too easily. What they didn't see was what lay dormant just beneath the calm. I watched them play their game. And I waited. Not out of revenge, but because I knew something they didn't. Every move they made, every lie, every betrayal, every digital breadcrumb was already part of a much bigger pattern. And I had all the pieces. They thought I was asleep, but I was just watching the door, waiting for the moment to open it. The night they made their first real move, it was raining. Not the soft kind of rain you fall asleep to, but the hard, rhythmic kind that drums against windows like a warning. I sat alone in the kitchen, drinking black coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. Upstairs, Sarah was laughing into her phone, that low, hushed kind of laugh people use when they think they've gotten away with something. She had started using a second phone. She thought I didn't know. She was wrong. That week, I had traced over a dozen encrypted messages between her and Evan. They weren't clever. They thought they were, of course. But Evan used the same phrasing too often, the same time windows, patterns. And patterns are easy to break once you stop looking for emotion and start looking at structure. One message read, "He'll fold if we hit him with the lawsuit first. He's too quiet. No spine." Another, "We'll have access to the client list within days. He's careless, doesn't even lock his office anymore." They were already speaking of me in the past tense. They thought they'd already won. 3 days later, the papers came, filed through a firm in Los Angeles. Slick, quiet. Smart, if you were dealing with an ordinary man. Sarah served them to me personally, handed them across the kitchen counter as if she was giving me a grocery list. There was a flicker of something behind her eyes, something like guilt, but it disappeared quickly, buried under a rehearsed calm. She waited for me to say something. I didn't. I just looked at the papers, nodded once, and set them down beside my coffee mug. Then I smiled. Not at her, but past her. She didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. They accused me of breach of contract, of financial misconduct. They wanted to freeze my accounts, strip me of company control, invalidate my ownership of the software I had built, code they didn't even know was designed with backdoors only I could access. But they thought I was finished. Because I didn't flinch. Because I didn't scream. Because silence, to them, meant surrender. What they didn't realize was that I had already moved everything important. Funds, servers, documents, weeks before. I had quietly replaced key executives with people loyal to me. I had planted the seeds. They were just watering the wrong garden. Still, I let the lawsuit proceed. I wanted them to feel momentum. I wanted them to believe in their success like children believe in fairy tales. They started being sloppy. Evan made a mistake. One email sent from the wrong account connected to an offshore entity used for bribes in Florida real estate. It was the first crack in a very polished mask. Sarah, emboldened by Evan's confidence, began reaching out to old clients of mine, offering them new partnerships if they walked away from my company. I watched them all, through the cameras they forgot existed. One day, I watched Sarah walk into my office when she thought I was out. She stood there for a while, just looking around. Then she sat in my chair, opened my drawer, pulled out a folder I had left there on purpose. Inside, blank pages, a test. She took pictures of everyone. She never asked why I came home so late that week. She didn't notice the way I scanned the room when I entered. She didn't know that I was already preparing for the courtroom, not as a man on trial, but as an executioner with a dossier. The night before the hearing, Sarah stood by the window staring into the darkness. She asked me, softly, if I had ever regretted anything in my life. I told her no. I had made choices. I had lived with them. Regret, I said, was a luxury for people who didn't know how dangerous forgiveness could be. She turned her head slightly, then she asked if we could ever go back to how things were. I looked at her for a long moment, and I told her the truth. Things were never what you thought they were. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom alone. No lawyer, no entourage, Just me, a black folder under my arm, and a calm smile they all misunderstood. Evan was there. He looked amused, tapping something into his phone. Sarah wore a pale blue suit, like she was trying to become someone new. She didn't meet my eyes. The judge, a man named Calder, looked bored. He'd already made up his mind. I could see it in the way he shifted papers without reading them. He thought this would be quick. It wasn't. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pace or shout or point fingers. I opened the folder, and one by one I began to show them what they never saw coming. Bank transfers, wiretap transcripts, photos of hidden meetings. A phone recording of Calder himself discussing a guaranteed outcome for a price. The room changed slowly. First confusion, then disbelief, then silence. The kind that only comes when everyone in the room realizes they are no longer in control. And I wasn't done. I showed how Evan laundered money through 3 fake consultancies, how Sarah used company data to broker deals behind closed doors, how 2 other board members had quietly moved shares without disclosure. I laid it all bare. I wasn't there to win. I was there to reveal. By the end of it, Sarah's hands were shaking, Evan had gone pale, and Calder had quietly asked to recess the hearing, but it was too late. The dominoes had already fallen, and the world they built on arrogance and betrayal was beginning to collapse. In the days that followed the hearing, everything fell apart. Not for me, but for them. Evan was arrested first. He was still trying to charm his way through it when they took him, smiling in a tailored suit, shaking hands like he had nothing to hide. But the moment they opened the sealed evidence, the bank trails, the doctored contracts, the offshore communications with shell companies in the Caymans, the smile cracked. By the time the cuffs clicked around his wrists, his confidence had already drained from his eyes. The news broke within hours. Words like fraud, racketeering, federal investigation flooded headlines. And for a brief moment, Sarah vanished. Not physically, no. She still lived in the same house, still drove the same car, still wore the same perfume that used to linger on my shirts. But something in her went dark. She started leaving her lights off when she came home. She began checking her rearview mirror more than she used to. She started wondering if someone was watching, because someone was. Her friends stopped answering. Her accounts froze one by one. The companies she'd tried to connect with, the ones she and Evan had courted behind my back, cut ties overnight. Not with loud apologies, just silence, as if she had ceased to exist. That's the part they never understand. It's not just about proving people guilty. It's about making sure they never get the chance to rise again. She tried to fight at first, hired a private investigator, a man named Clay Parsons. Retired cop, known for digging deep and keeping his mouth shut. He lasted a week, then he sent her a single message. "You were right to be scared. Walk away. I won't touch this again." After that, she stopped trying to bring anyone in, because she was starting to understand something she never believed before. I don't leave trails. I leave warnings. A few days later, she stood at my front door, same blue suit from court, but now it looked like armor cracking at the edges. She had lost weight. Her voice was hoarse when she said my name. I opened the door slowly. Waited. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm not even here to apologize." I watched her face, the way her eyes darted just slightly. Always calculating, always measuring risk, but not anymore. Now she was trying to survive something she couldn't name. She looked at me then, and for the first time in months, there was no mask on her face. Just quiet fear, and something else. Recognition. "I didn't know who you were," she said. "No," I replied, "but I did." She asked if there was a way out, not back. She knew that was gone, just out, away from whatever this had become. I told her I could offer one chance. 1. I gave her a location, a town in northern Idaho, small and off-grid. I gave her a new name, a basic identity, and a phone number to call once a month to confirm she was still where she promised to be. No contact with anyone from her past, no attempts to rebuild, just live quietly. An echo of a life she once tried to destroy. She didn't argue. She just asked, "What happens if I break the rules?" I didn't answer. She didn't ask again. She left that night. I watched her drive off, taillights vanishing into the mist. And just like that, Sarah became a ghost, like the one she tried to bury. Half a year passed. The world moved on, as it always does. The headlines shifted to new scandals. Evan's trial stretched on, but no lawyer could explain the volume of evidence. Some whispered about government involvement, others claimed whistleblowers. But no one ever connected the dots. Because the kind of justice I deal in isn't designed to be seen. It's designed to be understood by those it touches. I didn't rebuild the business. I dissolved it. Every asset moved, redirected, hidden. Not because I needed to hide, but because I had something new in mind. Not revenge, not power. Something else. I started watching different kinds of people. Ones who preyed on the weak, who thought laws were paper shields and money could silence pain. I began collecting names, faces, patterns, the kind most people ignored because they didn't want to see. One night, around midnight, I got a call. Unknown number, a pause, then a familiar voice, soft, shaking. It was Sarah. "I know I shouldn't call," she whispered. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did, what I became." I listened, let the silence stretch. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." There was a long pause before I answered. "Some things can't be undone." She didn't say anything after that. She just hung up, and I didn't call back, because I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. I had simply outgrown the part of myself that had once believed peace was something I could build with people who were never honest enough to share it. Now, I belonged to something else. Not a system. Not a cause. A purpose. I don't wear uniforms anymore. I don't answer to orders. But I still follow one rule. Those who betray others, they never walk away clean. They carry it, and eventually it catches up to them. Like a shadow. The wind was sharp that morning. Not cold exactly, but slicing. Like the kind that carries messages. The kind you feel before anything else. I stood on the edge of a rooftop, watching the city wake below. The sun hadn't yet broken the skyline, but you could feel it coming. That first light, faint and gold, catching on glass towers and bus windows. Below me, people rushed through intersections. Coffee cups. Tired eyes. Heads down. None of them knew what had happened. What was still happening, and they never would. That's the point. In the 6 months since everything fell apart, I had watched the pieces settle into silence. Sarah was gone. At least the version the world knew. Evan was locked away in a prison built not of stone, but of everything he could no longer touch. Power, money, control. The judge had resigned. The board members disappeared quietly into legal obscurity. And I had vanished, not in fear, but in full control. Sometimes I wondered what they thought at night, if they saw me when they closed their eyes. Not my face, not my voice. Just the idea of me. That quiet, watching thing they couldn't shake. They never really feared me. They feared what I knew, what I could become if I stopped pretending to be one of them. I remember once, during training, someone said, "The best kind of ghost isn't the one that haunts halls, it's the one that rewrites the blueprints while everyone else is still asleep." I didn't understand that then. I do now, because this city, this world, is built on paper promises and systems that bend for those who pay enough. But somewhere underneath, In all that rot and arrogance, there are people crying quietly into the dark, hoping someone will hear them. No one does. Until I do. That's why I came back. Not to reclaim anything, not to punish, but to tip the balance. It started with a name. A girl, 17, taken across state lines by men who wore smiles and suits and used paperwork like weapons. Her mother reported it. Nothing happened. Case in review. Files lost. She tried to speak up. They threatened her with custody. I saw her name on a forgotten forum, posted by someone desperate enough to beg strangers for justice. They didn't expect an answer. They got me. It took 6 days, not because it was hard, but because it had to be exact. Clean, total. I found the accounts, the transport route, the buyers. I didn't knock on doors. I made them disappear. Not violently, not loudly, just gone. The girl came home, her mother never knew how. No press, no charges, no explanation, just a letter in the mailbox that read, "No one will hurt her again." After that, more names began to reach me, not through phones, not through contracts, but through silence. Whispers passed between people who had nothing left but fear. And me. I became something else entirely. Not a man. Not a myth, a consequence. Sometimes I hear my name in rooms I never enter. I see people flinch when they realize someone's watching. Not the cameras. Not the police. Someone who doesn't wait for permission to do what's right. One night I got a message, a burner line I hadn't used in years. No ID. Just 3 words. I still regret it. It was from Sarah. Somewhere out there, she was still trying to make peace with the shadow that passed through her life like a quiet storm. I didn't answer. She wasn't the point anymore. I didn't need closure. I needed purpose. Now, when I walk, I don't hear my footsteps. I move between spaces, airports, alleys, hotel lobbies, with no name, no trace. I'm the man in the corner no one notices. The voice on the line that tells you what you've been too afraid to face. I don't need thanks. I don't need credit. I just make sure the guilty don't sleep too easily. That the powerful remember there are rules they can't rewrite. Because for every system that fails, there has to be someone who doesn't. The wind shifted again. The first rays of sun touched the skyline. I stepped back from the edge, pulling the hood of my jacket over my head, blending into the morning like I was never there. And somewhere out there, someone was about to learn. Choices have consequences. Truth has teeth. And justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just arrives. Quiet, precise, unforgiving. Just like me. You know, sometimes life doesn't give you second chances. Sometimes you make one mistake, and it follows you like a shadow. I lost everything because I stopped being honest. With him, with myself. And the hardest part is, he warned me. Not with words, but with silence. Life is not always black and white. People make choices out of fear, out of greed, out of pain. But no matter what happens, you have to stay human. Even when you fall. Even when you're broken, and if you're watching this, maybe you're going through something hard. Maybe you've been betrayed. Or maybe you were the one who walked away. But I believe, if there's one thing we should never give up on, it's the truth. Because the truth always finds its way back. One way or another. Thank you for watching this story. If it made you feel something, leave a comment. I'd love to know your thoughts. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many stories here about ordinary people who've lived through impossible things, about pain, strength, betrayal, and sometimes even redemption. We tell these stories because someone out there needs to hear them. Maybe that someone is you.